Hello and welcome to day 7 of Advent of Code 2024. In today's video, we're going to repair a bridge. So we're getting an input like this, where the left part is the result of an equation and the right part is a broken equation. And our job is to see if we can form a correct equation by using these two numbers and getting to this value. So for this one, it's pretty visible that if we have a multiplication number between these two, we get to 190. Now the operations that can be used are multiplication, star, and the addition. And the precedence rule doesn't apply here. So if we have like a plus sign here and a multiplication line here, we would go and add these two together and then multiply by this. So the multiplication does not have precedence over the addition. Okay, so that's it for puzzle number 1. That's what we are going to find out. And for each of the numbers that are correct, or for each of the rows that are correct, we would get this number and add it up to get to the final value that we want. So for example, here 190 is correct, and then 3267 is correct, this one, by providing a multiplication between 81 and 40 and then add it to 27. So just like always, I'm reading the file input here and getting the values into this data. Then using split, I would split the data into different rows. So each of these rows will be a row. Then I would use replace to remove this column here. So like this, the column would go out. So it would be 192, then space, and then rest of the numbers. Then I would split by space. So at the end, if I go and log the list here, you can see the numbers are like this. And then finally, I will map them to numbers so that I can do the addition and multiplication on the numbers. So let's remove this here. Now, the thing that I need to do is for all the numbers that I have, I need to produce all the forms of the operations for them. And if one of the operation is working, then I won't do the rest. So, for example, if I have like these numbers, I would have two placement for the operation. This can be like plus and plus, or multiply multiply, or multiply plus, or plus multiply. So these are the 4 different ways that I can form an equation by these numbers and these two operations. Okay? So how we would do that? I would create a result, set it to 0, and then for each of the lists that I created here, for each of the row, I would get the target value, which is the row at index 0, which is this one, for example, and the rest of the numbers would be here. Okay, so the target would be row at index 0, and the numbers would be row slice from 1. Remember that when I did the list here, I get an output which was like this. So from this list, I would get this and put it in the target and the rest of these into the numbers. Okay. Then I would write a function, check combinations for target, and I would provide the numbers and target to it. Now, if this returns true, I would add the target value to the result. Otherwise, I won't do anything. And finally, I would log the result. Now, the important part is here, check the combination for target. So let's go and see what's happening here. Now, I need to create all the operations. So if I have like 3 numbers, I need to create plus plus, this, this, and this. If I have like 5 numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, then there are 4 spots here, 1, 2, 3, and 4 spots. So I need to create 16 different operations, 2 to the 4. So it would be like this, and then this, and so forth and so on, okay? Now, here is where I'm creating all those operations in a 2D array. In the beginning, I will start with each of the operations in its own array. So in the beginning, the operation combination would be something like, let me log it so you can see. Then go here. So this would be like this in the beginning. Then for each of these, I would create a plus and the star. So after each iteration, here, for example, you can see that, or not here, like here, you can see what would be the difference. Let me remove the data from here because we don't need that. Only one would suffice for us. So you can see that after like 2 times iteration, I would get to this, and then after 3 times iteration, I would get to this. Now I have built my operations, as you saw. Now for each of these, I would do the evaluation. So if, for example, I have this, and let's say I have these 4 numbers, I would go and get this number as the result, and then do this operation on this with this, okay? So I would say, okay, the result is 10, then go and say 10 times 19 would be 119, and then put it on the result. The result would be 119, so I would go and say, okay, 119, then plus 12. Then whatever the result is, multiply by 15, okay? So the result is number at index 1, 0, sorry. And then for all of these combinations that we have here, if the combination is plus, then the next number will be added to the result. If it's multiplication, then multiply it. And when these operations are done on the result, we'll check the result. If the result is like the target, they're the same value, return true, so we have been able to create the equation correctly. We return true. Otherwise, if we go to the end of the for loop and nothing is produced, or the thing that is produced is never equal to the target, we return false. Okay? So I hope it makes sense. So again, here I would create the operations. I would go with an array of the operations in the first place. So convert this to a 2D array, and then for each of them, I would create a new array. Like here. I would get the combination, spread it, and then add the operation to it. And the rest is as you saw. Just for each of them, I would do the calculation here. This will result in final answer for part 1. Now for part 2, there is another operation, which is this one. Using this number, we'll concat numbers like this. So 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would be just like this. So we have now 3 different operations: addition, multiplication, and concatenation. So let's go and see what should we do. Basically, it's kind of the same thing. The only difference is that I would add the operation like this, but I provide one pipe. It doesn't make any difference to have 1 or 2. Then the creation of the combination is the same thing, but here there is only one point, and that is if the combination is like a pipe, we need to add those two numbers together. Now, one way is that if I have these two numbers, I can get the log of this by 10 and see that this is like 3, and then have 10 to power of 3, which will be 1,000, and then multiply this by 1,000, so it becomes 1, 2, and then 3 zeros, and then add that to 3, 4, 5 to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the easier way is like to convert this to a string and then convert this to a string and then add them together. So it creates a string of these two numbers and then convert it back to number so that we could later on add or multiply if needed. So that just happens here. I would get the result as it was from the previous operations, and I would add a empty string here, so converts to string and then adds to the number of I plus 1. So the result will be a string here, but at the end I would use the number, or you could use the parse int to convert it back to the number. Now if this is done, the rest is just the same. Now the only thing is that this would take some time to run, but at least it's working. We could later on, if we wanted to, we could check here if that operation, anytime the result gets bigger than the target, we could abort and don't do the rest of the calculations. So for example, in the example that I have here, if I have multiplication here, this would become 190, which is the same as this. So doing whatever we want to do with this would create a bigger number, 190, which will result in invalid value at the end. So starting with a start doesn't work here, or concatenation doesn't work here either. So that might be something that we want to think about, but that's a huge deal. We can get to the number that we want at the end of this. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If that's the case, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and see you in the next video.